I'm Bryan Hartson, and this is The Bryan Hartson Show. And continuing our July theme of Christmas in July, my favorite holiday, I hope you're having fun with it as well. Today we have a very special guest with us, and her name is Samantha Roberts. Now, Samantha's story is a story of triumph after disaster. After 12 years, mute and nonverbal, following back-to-back car accidents and narrowly escaping death upon flipping a quad down a rock quarry, Samantha reached her own personal rock bottom. Now, through the power of community and mentorship through Grant Cardone, she found her voice again and her conviction to live a life of contribution and service. During the quarantine of 2020, she became a Grant Cardone licensee and launched her podcast, Storytelling by the Numbers. She also has the Proximity is Power Summit series. She's committed to lifting 1,000 voices in courageous conversations in our newly invigorated virtual economy. Her story is amazing. Nothing less. So, let's meet Samantha. Come on, let's go. Hello and welcome to the Bryan Hartson Show. I have got an amazing person with us today. Samantha is with us and she's just got a great story. Hi Samantha, how are you?
Hi Bryan, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being on. We've had a little bit of history and we were able to talk a little bit before we actually came on the air. And your story is one that I'm hoping that all my listeners will drop what they're doing, unless they're driving, and listen to, because it's really going to be a compelling story, I think. And so why don't you take us back to the beginning of where all this happened and all the struggles that you went to achieve the success that you're at right now. And I'm going to talk about reading in a little bit, so, or at least listening.
Yeah, I think what's really, compelling and fascinating about a health and life transformation story is that you have to dig into your own self-respect and self-journey about what it is you stand for and how you get to the place you are in now. And for me, what I had to really think about in that time of darkness after those two accidents, and sitting in that solitude and understanding that I could live this life of diminished impact in the world. I could live this life of not living at my full capacity and power, or I could get a little uncomfortable, a little more uncomfortable, and move myself out of my home state of Oregon into New York City and start over completely fresh on my own, single woman, big city, big corporate dreams on the horizon, but a diminished physical state. And when I looked at my life at that time, I said, this isn't going to be easy, but it's the right thing to do for me in order to ensure that I absolutely find my way out of this. It had been the first time in my life where I was physically diminished, where I didn't have the strength, capacity, the wherewithal to pull myself out of just about everything else that had come up in my world. And so I knew I needed to reevaluate. I needed to get in new conversations, new engagements, new opportunities, so that I was being stretched in a different way. It was a long decade in darkness of growth before I really found community, before I found the outreach of others to lift me forward. But I think it was a beautiful time of introspection and building this corporate career that I had as a senior data analyst and strategist in corporate America, and rising the corporate ladder with gusto and fervitude, right? Like I was able to push myself and live a compelling life in so many respects. But when I looked at what I was doing to myself as a person, my physical state, I was completely diminished. My self-worth was in the toilet. I took on the weight, the stress of everybody and everyone that needed something from me. They were first priority. I needed to reevaluate that. I needed to dig deep and see what what life really was going to be about. And, it's hard to encompass your whole life in such a short amount of time. But I think for me, the awakening really happened October 2019. Everything kind of came together all at once. My body shut down on me, and I needed 2 emergency life-saving surgeries for what's called May-Turner syndrome. I have a blood clotting issue, and I had 86% blockage in my main iliac vein. And, one blood clot away at 32 years old from not waking up, one blood clot away from complete ruin. And at that point, I entered Grant's mentoring community. I joined Pete Vargas, who's an incredible storyteller, and I joined with Pat Quinn and all these different incredible thought leaders, and the communities and the masterminds that those leaders attract. And they started saying, there's more in you. There's something you can do with this story, with this life that you've led. So for me, it's been an incredible journey. And now every single day I just get to engage in these courageous conversations. I've only been speaking powerfully for about a year now, and only truly powerfully for about the last 6 months. So I find it incredible every single day. I just have the opportunity to pour into others, to receive others. The greatest gift of a nonverbal is that we hold space incredibly powerfully, and to be able to open up the floor for others to share their story, to share their journey, to share their, zone of genius, as I like to call it. I think it's just been really transformative for me.
So you were in the corporate life. We talked a little bit about this.
Yeah.
The corporate life is, if you're not in the corporate life, then you have no idea what we're talking about, right? It is a beast.
High stress, high anxiety, high, combativeness, right? It's very dog eat dog. It's, there's a lot to be said for what can come out of it. You learn and you grow very rapidly. But diminishing your own self-worth for the greater cause of the team is part of the hazing process. It's what I like to call the hazing process, right? You learn how to not have a point of view of your own. You learn how to, talk the same, sound the same, use the same verbiage and languaging, dress the same. There's a lot of unifying factors that come into the corporate environment because, in the original creation of the corporate environment in the 80s, that made sense, right? When you're optimizing these great practices. But now that technology is fluid and creative endeavors and ideas are required, I think there's going to be a major shift in the corporate environment where we find individuality again. I think where we foster that incredible, unique energy of a great leader. So I think we're in the middle of a shift now. But yeah, for anybody who hasn't been in that environment, I mean, it's tough. We work 15 hours a day quite often. And because I was big data, it was like if you get in the middle of a project, you can't stop at 10 p.m., right? There's times when you work through the night because if you're on the cusp of a breakthrough, you'll forget in the morning exactly what's about to come next. So we just would keep going, long hours, days on days. So.
And how many years did you do that? About
15.
About 15 years of hitting the grind. 18, 15, 18, 20-hour days, sometimes probably 24. I've been there. And then your body just said, "Oh, I'm done," right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, I was already in that diminished state from the accidents. And then you add the corporate stress on top of it. Every ounce of energy that I could muster was leveraged during the day, and I would go home and just crawl in bed. I didn't have any physicality in my life, which has now left me with muscle atrophy throughout most of my body.
How's that working now? That it's been what, a year and a half?
Since I exited, it's been since January this year.
Oh, since January. Okay, so it's even less time than I thought. You look amazing, by the way. Just I gotta tell you, it's just amazing. So, just since January, you're functioning better now. And
debatable. I live down now in Miami Beach, and I go to the ocean in the morning. And going into the ocean in the morning, just that jostling is enough to send me back into chronic pain. So it's a work in progress. I'm very strong from the seated position, right? Which is the beautiful thing about the digital virtual economy, is I can host these incredible interviews from the seated position, and I feel like a whole person. I don't feel fragmented. I don't feel as though, the chronic pain is crippling any longer, right?
So, there's years ago it was said you would never elect a president that's in a wheelchair if he was on TV, right? It happened. So how does that make you feel all this time? You're in this state now where you're rehabilitating yourself, you're getting better, you're day by day by day. Do you think that you're limited now because of the trauma that you've gone through, or do you think people look at you just as creatively as you have been in the past?
Oh, I mean,
question.
No, I feel like there's so much strength in the journey that I've been on, and there's so much relatability. I think because I present invisibly with my chronic pain and my challenges, I think that's a guiding light for those who suffer in a more visible form, right? Like I think it's a great equalizer. Every single person, regardless of what you envision their life to be, has challenge and hardship and moments where they feel defeated or depleted. And I think it's a great unifier to be able to have us all realize that, yes, I present as this 34-year-old woman who's vibrant and got all this energy, but that's from the seated position and the safety of my office chair. And when I'm opening up the next half of this year to stage opportunities where I'll be speaking and sharing my story more. And so now the training needs to start where I can stand in a physical capacity, right? So I had an opportunity 2 weeks ago to be on my first stage of the year, and my body didn't really keep up, right? And that's something that I'm okay with, right? That's the reality of my journey. Every single part of my brand is authenticity, right? I wave the white flag and I say, this is where I'm at, right? We can come through this together. Whatever challenge you're facing, someone else is facing it too. So find that person. You're not alone. And I think that's really powerful, right? The unifier is that we're all challenged, we're all struggling, we're all doing something that's uncomfortable or less than what we've envisioned. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, and you're wearing your badge, if you will, on your body of when you're standing there. A lot of people don't have the badge of being able to show pain or show suffering or show weakness, if you will. And so it's even harder for somebody like that to present as a person that needs some assistance, a person that needs somebody to talk to, somebody to coach them and develop them. Agree?
Well, what I find fascinating about that statement is the depression that I was experiencing for that decade. You could physically see it on my face, and my skin was gray. I was sallow. And there was this bright, vibrant, energy that you see in front of you today. It was tangible how poorly I was taking care of my body. And so I think anybody who feels as though they can't showcase the extreme of their challenge may feel like it's hard to ask for help. And I just continually say, your story, your journey is your own. And anybody you choose to share it with can receive you and help in some way. Or maybe your opportunity to showcase your challenge is their first opportunity to see a reflection back at them at what they're actually going through. I know one of the greatest things that I have in my toolbox right now is the fact that I had great friends come into my life who had the languaging to describe what it was that I was actually going through, right? When you have somebody who can showcase to you, okay, this is what my depression symptoms were, this is what my, chronic illness symptoms are, it helps you realize that there's a reason why you feel the way that you feel. there's a prescription of how to get through it, or life hacks that you can amplify to get through it. So I think it's compelling just to share, because you don't know what you'll receive back.
That's very interesting. That's sort of like, here I am, here's all of me. What are you going to do with me?
I think it's a new path forward for, the Great Awakening that happened in 2020. That slowdown gave us all as adults the opportunity to have our non-negotiables at the forefront, to choose who we are and what we stand for, to actually have this ability to bear witness to the elements of life that we've accepted that don't actually represent who we are at the core. So I think this new transparency is our greatest opportunity in the next half of the year and the years to come, because generations past never showed emotion. I'm someone who never cried one tear until I was 18, based on the childhood I had. And I learned emotion in my 20s. I learned transparency in the last few years. I learned that it's okay to have weakness. Because weakness, it doesn't diminish you. It just makes you human.
So what do you think are biggest challenges going into, or coming out of, hopefully, out of a quarantine and out of changing lives? Now, the corporate world, to me, this is my personal opinion, but the corporate world has changed because you don't necessarily have to go to the office. I mean, if you want to buy a house, you can do it from your own room. And when you call somebody up on the phone nowadays, what do you hear in the background? Life. You hear a child, you hear somebody screaming, you hear an alarm go off. It's called life.
Yeah. I think it's a beautiful opportunity for us to be human. And I think this lends a beautiful opportunity for us to be global citizens, right? The greatest gift of the new way of living is that now any time zone, I can hop on a video call with someone from another country, connect and engage with them. Is a great unifier. And for businesses to realize that you can't just dominate your employees' day and have their whole life be wrapped around your needs, and to actually give them the capacity, the bandwidth, the flexibility to be human, I think is the new path forward. That's where innovation is going to come from. That's where new ideas for the business and new synergies are going to come from. There's no longer this need to put you in a box and hide you away from real life for 10 hours a day, right? There's no longer this requirement, I hope, in the new wave of, canceling having your employees cancel their dentist appointment 4 times because you have a meeting pop up. Right? There needs to be more of a life balance.
Right.
Moms and dads are parents for the first real time, right? So many kids have been raised by the school activities, by the extracurricular activities, by the school bus driver, whatever it might be. And so I think this is a really major opportunity for the family construct to shift, to alter, to change, for people to feel that they're more than their career. One of the things I learned when I was traveling around Europe in 2016, I did 7 months backpacking around Europe, 21 major cities in those 7 months. And what I noticed is Americans introduce themselves by their profession. Europeans and other international citizens introduce themselves by what their passions were, what their purpose was. That was eye-opening for me. That was transformative for me, to realize that in America you are identified by what you do with your time, but your time is dominated by something that's external from you. And there's so little opportunity for you to actually have a point of view and a perspective and rapid acknowledgement of your own self-worth. And so I find that so compelling, that we have this opportunity to reinvent our own identities.
We do, don't we? It's actually, it's almost like a biblical reset, if you will,
I like that.
on society. We are, it's like, and I don't want to disrespect anybody's own personal beliefs, but I believe that there's a higher power. I believe that he guides me and moves me in the right directions. And I believe that everything that happens for a reason. And I think that for me personally, seeing the things that happened a year and a half ago, I was like, whoa, hold on now. This is a huge change. My kids got to be taught at home, which is fine. My wife's a third grade teacher. But my kids got to be taught at home, and I got to play dad instead of playing corporate boss. And I have the ability to say, hold on, my granddaughter's crying. And I've got the ability to talk to somebody that's a CEO in Singapore at 8 o'clock at night. And it's a whole other day for them over there. And I can ask them, hey, what's my day going to be like? Because they're so far ahead. So for me, that's my aha moment here, is that I needed to take a complete reset. And your body is telling you take a reset, but powers that be said, oh, here's your hurdle. So your hurdle is a big hurdle that's visual, right? It's tangible, it's quantitative. My challenges aren't as much that, because it's choice factors. So I think that you've got a position of being able to really to talk to people and say, look, you know what, anything is possible. Anything that you want to do is possible, and I'm here showing you that it's possible, because look at me today, correct?
I'm me. And I think that's important for more of us to just be ourselves, right? To pull the mask down, to pull the perfection away, and just show up as ourselves. But we can really alter and shift the dynamic of the next generation by simply showing up and showcasing that challenge is real, hardship is real. No matter how high you climb on a corporate ladder or a professional level, you'll still have challenges. And I think the more that, as a global society, we can just unify into that factor and just allow people to realize that, whatever imperfection comes in your life, there's a lesson there. Lean into that lesson. Share that lesson with somebody else. Every gift of challenge that I've received in my life, and there are so many, is a gift. And now that I really honor that, I see my contribution growing.
I love that. I just love everything about what you talk about. You're just like, you're an inspiration. And when we come back after the break here, I want to talk about what's burning on my mind. And we talked a little bit about it, but I'll just leave a little tease with it, and we'll talk about listening to books. All right, I'll be right back.
Hi, this is Philip with Trinity Teas, and we're at the Old Town Temecula Farmers Market in Temecula, California, Saturdays 8 to 12:30 p.m. And we're talking about our teas. And the Golden Milk is all anti-inflammatory. It's ginger, turmeric, and cinnamon, sampled in a vanilla almond milk. Extremely anti-inflammatory. We sample it in the vanilla almond milk, no dairy, no caffeine, and we make it taste like a Mexican drink called horchata. If you haven't tried that before, it reminds people of like a cinnamon toast cereal or a nice dessert drink. So come and check us out at the Farmers Market in Old Town Temecula, Saturdays 8 to 12:30. Have a good day.
And you are back with Bryan Hartson on the Bryan Hartson Show. We've got an amazing show here, a show of courage, strength, overwhelming challenges. And Samantha is with us today, telling us a little bit about her story, and it's quite a story. I do want to pop up right here. If you want to get in contact with Samantha, here is some information for you to go ahead and hop onto her website or her Facebook page there. If you have a QR, a phone that's like a smartphone, just hold it up and to that little box right there, and it'll pop up. You just hit the OK button, and it's going to take you right over to this page, which is Samantha's page. And Samantha, thank you again for being with us on the show. I teased a little bit about wanting to talk about something that just amazed me. Tell me about your ability to read now, or listen and comprehend on a massive level. Listen to this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the great gifts that came out of those accidents was post-concussion syndrome. And for a decade, the only part of my brain that really functioned properly was the analytical side, hence the corporate career. The articulation of my point of view and my short-term memory was completely diminished. And when I got back from that European travel in 2016, I started listening to audiobooks. The first one I listened to, pardon the language, this is a curse word, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Ronson. And I listened to that on 2x speed. And it did something to me energetically. It lifted me up and helped me understand that I could start to feel the words again, because I hadn't been reading in that decade. Everything was visual output or data aggregation in my corporate life. So meaning I was watching TV, I was watching movies, everything was passive. I wasn't doing anything that was inflow. And so I started listening to these audiobooks on Audible, and I started finding, inspirational leaders, thought leaders who inspired me, and listening to their books at 2x speed, then 3x speed, then 3.5, and now I'm up to 5. At 5x speed, it does something to you energetically. You feel these words, and if you think about the power of language, when you think about the frame of reference I had of being 12 years mute nonverbal, I see the unspoken. So when I'm listening to these authors articulate their books, I'm visibly seeing them in a sense as well. I can picture them. I can picture, the message coming through them. And for me, it's an energetic experience to listen to these books in this way. Most importantly, though, it has helped me refire the synapses in my brain. And I've started looking for neuroscientists and incredible thought leaders and doctors to start maybe researching this, because I'm onto something. I can undeniably say there's a difference in the way that my brain functions and feels, and experiences words that I'm reading and things that I'm aware of. So it used to be physically painful for me to learn something new. I would get so much pressure in my head and have this almost anxiety putting something new in my head. And as a corporate analyst, you're learning something new every single hour of every single day, right? And so I was constantly in this pressure in my head and this gap in what I could perceive. And again, being nonverbal, it was part of that. Feeling as though I couldn't access my own short-term memory, my thoughts, and my point of view, having that diminished by that post-concussion syndrome, it was a very real challenge for me. And now, as you're witnessing in real time today, the conversation just flows, right? There's a whole embodiment to the words that I express and the phrases that I use, and everything is off the cuff. I still don't have the capacity to memorize. So every courageous conversation that I have for my podcast is off the cuff. It's energetic. It's just engagement from what I'm reading from their nonverbals and what I'm picking up. And I mean, I want more people to start listening to their audiobooks. I suggest it to everybody. Listen to your audiobooks at rapid speed, especially if you're elevated in age. Because if I at my age, with the severity of what I was going through, can feel replenished from this, imagine if we all did it. Imagine if we all had this ability to repair some of that lack, some of that gap, some of that stutter in our thought processes.
Samantha, are you happy?
I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed. I feel so supported by so many community members. And I know I was gifted second life by all these different people pouring into me, that now I can just go and serve and just help others to feel this way as well. I mean, I think in our show notes, I should share with you the picture, the side-by-side comparison of just the darkness that I had in my essence compared to today, because it's transformative to see the variation, to know that from all accounts, I was living my best possible life, and yet I was so unsatisfied and so unfulfilled. And I think when we share ourselves with others, we just open up and a whole new world comes to fruition.
Yeah, and I think that's what reached out to me in our first conversation together. And, ladies and gentlemen, this is completely unscripted. And when Samantha and I first had our conversation, it was just to get to know each other, and there was a connection there between. I felt there was a connection between you and me, And I love the idea of a non-scripted conversation with you. I love those anyway, but in this particular case, I wanted to see where we would go with it. And I think there's a lot more to talk about. I think you have a ton of things to be able to give my listeners, your friends, your people that you know, the person that's watching this for the first time, never seen the Bryan Hartson show, but just happened to click on the button and, oh, well, let's see what this is about, that you might be talking to. And in reality, and I'm going to bring this down just a notch, though, okay? Because you're a strong person. You went through something I don't wish on anybody, and look where you are today. But there is somebody out there right now that might be watching this show, and maybe not as desperate a situation that you had, but to them, they are at the end of their rope. This is at, I want to give up because I lost my job, I lost my house, I lost my family, I lost mobility, I lost my ability to speak, I can't read, whatever it is, that somebody's watching. What do you have to say to them?
As my dear friend Cynthia Kahi, who just wrote this book, would say, you can do hard things. You can do hard things. And when you think that you can't, find somebody else who can listen. Find someone who can pour into you, because I am full representation of not knowing my own self-worth until I had the strength to ask other people to pour into me. And even without having the full strength to articulate that I needed them to pour into me, I continued to show up. Even if you're showing up at a diminished capacity, but you do it with repetition, you will be received by the person who can help you put one foot in front of the other. You will be received by the one person who can give you that tiny little insight to reframe something that you've been experiencing and going through. Know that whatever you're experiencing today, someone else on the planet has been through it too. And every hard thing that you've done in your life, you've won and conquered 100% of the time. That, for me, was the game-changing statistic. Because when you think about how dark it can get, you know that you overcame it every single time. The other reframe that I gave myself, no person on this planet alive today experiences anything that's not intended for them so that they can serve somebody else. If you're gifted a laundry list of hard things back to back and you just feel like you're at the point of breaking, get ready. That's when it starts to get really good. I am proof in the pudding on that one, baby. Know that when it's just continually knocking you around, that's building your strength, that's building your toolbox, that's building your reserves, because something really compelling is about to happen in your life.
So strap in and get ready for some amazing things, right?
Yeah.
Well, Samantha, we are at the end of the show, and I am very sorry to say that. But anybody that's watching this, listen, because what you're going through, no matter if it's great or if it's not, times will change. Things will get better. Things will get worse. But you're living proof of miracles, if you will. You're living proof that if you persist, that you can be laid up, not able to move, talk, and then be able to read 5 different books at 5 speed or whatever. It's just amazing. So thank you very much for being on the show. Do you have anything you want to tell our viewers before we pop off? Do you want to talk about your website, your Facebook page, or anything?
You can find me on all the social medias. We'll drop them in the links. But the real final message, just prepare yourself for whatever's coming. That journey you've been gifted is your greatest gift that you can give and serve into others. So when it gets hard, just make a list. It's going to help you serve others later.
Perfect. Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for being with us for this very special edition of the Bryan Hartson Show. We will be back with you very soon. Now, I do want to let you know I am in the process of moving to another state. And while I move to another state, I likely will not be doing much broadcasting. However, much like I did with our trip to the Grand Canyon, I may pull out some special little segments for you on our drive. 1,200 miles should be a lot of fun. That'll be coming up towards the end of the month. We will be back on Saturday with the final show for this month, likely, and we hope that you'll be able to join us. In the meantime, remember, this is the first day of the rest of your life. Make this moment count. I'm Bryan Hartson. Good night.